10 years of marriage deserved a celebration at height, but the gift that her husband prepared for his wife was, at the very least, unexpected. On wedding birthday day, with a smile on his lips, he lets out, "Congratulations on our birthday, my love. Oh, and I took the opportunity to transfer $3 million from your balance to Mom's account." While the mother-in-law arrived at the door with a bouquet of red roses in her arms, without suspecting she was entering a sprinkled field of tension, the situation had already taken an explosive course. Good night, dear listeners. Here is Andre Branco, and it is with great satisfaction that I receive them on the Souls in Conflict. Today I bring a story that will mess with your emotions and make you rethink the limits of respect in a relationship. Prepare for a narrative full of twists. Kenya Lucia Melnikov has always considered a patient woman. A decade alongside Igor taught her to swallow frogs and close her eyes to many things. The mother-in-law, Aline Borisovna, was a constant and invasive presence, always getting the bedello in the couple's life, while her husband invariably took advantage of her mother. But what happened on the day of the 10th anniversary was the water drop that overflowed the glass of patience. On the morning of that day, Kenya woke up with a light expectation in her chest. I dreamed that finally Igor would fulfill the promise of a romantic dinner, only the two. Instead, he went out to work with Amir until night, thrown in the air as if it were an unimportant detail. She spent all day preparing, bought an expensive wine, cooked a special dinner and put on a new dress, waiting for the moment her husband would come with some surprise that was worth it. When Igor came home, he was visibly excited. He hugged his wife and, with a solemn air, stated, "Happy birthday, my love. Oh, and I already solved a little problem from Mom. I spent $3 million of her account to her." Kenya froze. Those $3 million represented the payment for a large decoration project she had completed after 6 months of clear nights, adjusting every detail. It was his money, the result of his work, and access to that account was restricted, reserved only for emergencies. "What did you do?" she whispered, feeling the floor open under her feet. Igor shrugged, as if he was talking about time. "Mom wanted to buy a place around Sao Paulo, and it was just that amount. After all, we are family, aren't you? You don't care, right?" Kenya was silent, trying to soothe what she had just heard. $3 million. His money, sweaty, won with hours of dedication, donated without consultation, without even a warning. "Igor, this is my payment. My job." She exploded. "So what? We are a family," he repeated, as if it justified everything. What's more, she promised to return in a month when she sells her apartment in the South neighborhood. Kenya knew very well that Aline Borisovna would never sell that property. By the way, she had declared countless times that she would only leave dead. But arguing with her husband was like hitting head on the wall. An hour later, the doorbell rang. It was Aline, with a bouquet of red roses and a triumphant smile on her face. "Ken Hinha, honey," she sang, with a fake sweetness. "Congratulations on your birthday. Thank you too much for your help. You are a real daughter." The mother-in-law entered the house as if she owned the place and began to detail her plans for the property, the rose garden that was going to plant, the pool that would install next spring, the chalet that would build. "Of course you can't do it all at once," he sighed, as if it were a pity. "But the Ken Hinha will help us again, isn't it, my love?" Igor nursed proudly, while Kenya felt the rage boil inside. That woman who, for a decade, has poisoned her life, criticizing her food, stirring her belongings, guessing everything, since. Heart of the house to the education of grandchildren who didn't even exist, now there was still the face of spending his money as if it were hers. "And the apartment?" Kenya asked, with a calm that surprised her. "When will you sell it?" Aline hesitated for a second, but soon she recomposed herself. "Ah, the apartment. Well, I changed my mind. I'll save it as a reserve. But don't worry, I gradually return the money with my retirement." Kenya did the math on her head. 30,000 per month. 30 million divided by 30,000 gave 100 months. Almost 9 years of installments. "Understood," she said dryly and went to the kitchen. There, leaning against the sink, she was trying to calm down, but the fury only grew. He remembered each humiliation, criticism of his food, Sometimes the mother-in-law rearranged the house without asking permission, the personal effects that disappeared because Aline thought they were useless. And Igor, always silent, always on her mother's side, never defending her, never imposing limits. Now, on top of that, he stole from her. When he returned to the living room, he brought with him a fruit tray and a serene smile. Aline was still chattering on her plans, gesturing like a queen on her throne. Ken Hinha, couldn't you get a discount with your contacts? Do I need to renovate the kitchen of the site? Of course, Kenya replied, with a sweetness that made everyone suspicious. But first, let's formalize everything right. A loan receipt and a payment schedule. After all, I'm a businesswoman. I need everything documented for income tax. Aline frowned. What documents? For what? Igor tried to intervene. Ku, it doesn't need it. We are family. Precisely because we are a family, Kenya has countered, firmly, that everything has to be clear and transparent. She opened the notebook and started writing the contract, 3 million to be returned in a year, with interest of 24% per year, the standard rate of a personal loan. Interest, Igor protested. We didn't combine interest. We didn't combine anything, Kenya replied, cold. No one asked me. They took my money without permission. So now, follow the market rules. Aline, visibly nervous, had no choice. The money was already in your hands. He signed the paper, with some way to get away later. But Kenya wasn't going to get a break. The next day, she went to a lawyer, registered the document in a notary's office and opened an execution process if it was delayed. Igor was appalled. Are you going to sue my mother? And you stole your wife? She returned, without blinking. The first payment would win in a month. Of course Aline didn't pay. Instead, it appeared with another bouquet, whining about how retirement gave nothing, how expensive everything was. Ken Hinha, love, can't you postpone another month? No, Kenya replied, dry, and called the bailiffs. The next 6 months became a war. Aline tried everything, emotional blackmail, threats, appeals to distant relatives. Igor struggled between his mother and wife, begging for an agreement. But Kenya didn't give in. The officers blocked his mother-in-law's retirement, began to inventory their assets. Aline cried, accused her daughter-in-law of cruelty, told her neighbors that she was being brought to misery. Kenya, however, did not retreat. After 8 months, Aline broke. He sold the untouchable apartment and paid the debt with interest, correction, and court costs. The final amount was much higher than the initial 3 million. And Igor finally understood that actions have consequences. As for Kenya, she learned that patience has a limit and that sometimes justice needs to be done with her own hands. The debt, which was already swelling as a malignant tumor, reached the mark of 4 million hriaris. This I will never forgive you, Aline said between clenched teeth while pushing the paste with the checks toward Kenya. And I will never forgive the theft you committed against me, replied the young woman with a CA.LMA that frozen the blood of the mother-in-law. There was no hatred in his voice, just the coldness of those who had already closed this chapter of life with a wax seal. Igor desperately tried to mend the shards of marriage. Flowers in the office, expensive dinners, empty promises that this time it would be different. But Kenya had already learned to read between the lines. His excuses smelled of fear, not regret. When he signed the divorce papers, there were no tears, no screams, no soap opera scenes. Only the dry sound of the pen scratching the end point in a story that should have ended much before. In court, she did not need heroisms. Bank statements, contracts signed without their authorization, suspected deposits in Aline's account, everything spoke for themselves. The judge had no doubt, the division would not be half to half. Kenya recovered not only what was her by right, but also a generous slice of heritage built at the expense of her work, while Igor and her mother lived on illusions of greatness. The sentence was a clear verdict: who plays with fire burns their fingers. And in their case, the burn was third. 2 years later, Kenya inaugurated her own design studio, a luminous space. With white walls and furniture she projected herself. Customers did not take long to appear. Her name became synonymous with elegance and accuracy, and soon she was signing contracts with the city's most coveted addresses. He bought an apartment in Leblon, with a porch facing the sea, and began to fill the agenda with trips that were once only distant dreams: Paris, Tokyo, Tuscany. For the first time in years, it breathed without weight in the chest. Freedom, he found, was not the absence of strings, it was the certainty that no hands could more pull them. Igor, in turn, married again in less than a year. The new wife, an ambitious lawyer named Mariana, did not have the infinite patience of Kenya. In the third month of marriage, a line appeared without warning to adjust the spices from Sunday dinner. Mariana looked at her husband, crossed her arms, and released the sentence that sealed his fate: either she, or me. Igor hesitated for exactly 47 seconds, enough time to calculate that, without his mother's inheritance, he would not even be left over for rent. Chose a line. Mariana left home with her bags on the same day, and he was alone, at 42, with an empty apartment and the awareness that he had exchanged a woman who loved him for another who only knew how to suck. As for a line, the empire that was so felling off collapsed as a castle of cards. The money from the sale of the apartment barely gave to a tiny kitnet on the periphery, where the smell of mold disputed space with the bitterness of the choices. The jewel of the family, the country house, was revealed a deep-bottomed well, infected, flooded soil flooding the room, and a neighbor who insisted on throwing garbage at the edge of the terrain. A year later, he sold what was left for half the price, with the feeling that life had preached to him the last piece. One afternoon, at the mall, a line spotted Kenya among Louis Vuitton showcases. He approached with a forced smile, extending his hand as if nothing had happened. "Kenya, honey, how beautiful you are." The ex-Nora didn't even look away from the clock. He passed her with the elegance of who knows that silence is sometimes the most devastating answer. Aline stood, watching the slender figure walking away, and only then understood, she had lost not only a daughter-in-law, but the only person in the family who had a spine to hold everyone's weight. Igor still turned on from time to time: birthdays, Christmas, those pretexts that weak men use so as not to admit that they miss. Kenya answered, polite, distant. He had no grudge. Time had dissolved the anger, leaving only one fire-engaged lesson: never again. It would not let anyone, neither husband, no mother, no blood, dictate the terms of her life. Dinhe. Row, time, dreams, all of this had owners, and these owners were not the others. 5 years after divorce, at an art exhibition in São Paulo, he met Daniel. A man who spoke of partnership as who speaks of oxygen: natural, essential, without second intentions. They married in an intimate ceremony, where yes was a pact, not a surrender. When the son was born, Kenya looked at that perfect face and made a silent promise: you will grow knowing that trust is not a currency of exchange, and that being a man is above all being responsible. Because some lessons are not learned in books, they learn in scars. And hers, finally, had become strength.